See, a South Seattle Emerald columnist and soon-to-be former writer and publisher of Seattle City Council Insight, Kevin Schofield. Oh, hello, and why are you hanging up Seattle City Council Insight?
Hey, Bill. It's great to be here again, and I'm just looking forward to doing something new. I've been doing it for 6 years, and I'm just like many other people right now, ready to just have a change in my life.
Okay, you deserve it. Well done.
Thank
It's
you.
nice to see you on YouTube and Facebook. I look like I'm wearing a bib. It's actually a scarf, not a scarf, a mask pulled down momentarily. So I hope you had a good week. How many texts did you all get yesterday about 911 being down?
Couple.
Two.
Yeah, couple.
Oh, I must have gotten half a dozen, one right after the other. I got a voicemail. I got a phone call.
Well, they were expecting to hear from you, obviously.
Well, it scared me to the point where I called 911
and then no one came.
Yeah, no one came. 10 earthquakes off the Oregon coast this week, but not connected to our local big earthquake fault. So don't worry about that. No need to call 911. They're not answering anyway. Yeah, that was, I guess the other big thing is there's a certain city councilor up for a recall election. Let's start there here on the Week in Review. It's the end of the week and we still don't know whether Seattle's most polarizing city councilor is going to stay or go. Shama Sawant faced a recall election on charges of violating campaign law and recklessly protesting and trespassing, etc. They're counting votes, Kevin. I agree with you. I will not say that Sawant has pulled ahead or staged a comeback. We're just waiting. They're just counting.
Yeah, we're just waiting. They're almost done. It certainly looks like she's likely to succeed, and congratulations to her if she manages to beat the recall. And we should also say, yay for democracy and the rule of law, right? The voters of District 3 got to choose the person they want to represent them, and that's a great thing. We should all, celebrate that.
Oh, Joni, I know that you're not celebrating the recall.
Well, I'm not celebrating. I think no matter how this turns out, you have to say this is not a ringing endorsement of anything or anyone. The election is so close. I do agree the remaining questionable ballots are younger voters, so likely supporting Sawant. She's likely to pull this out. But look, recall's a pretty serious thing. And in this case, we know from the votes that we already have that half the people in Sawant's own district do not think she should be in office.
Half the people who actually voted, who actually
voted. That's right. And don't forget, only her district, District 3, was able to vote. So we won't know. We didn't ask the question of the rest of the city.
Yeah.
This is the first recall.
Sorry, Joni, I want to hear from Jonathan, but I'm just getting in that Shama Sawant just had a news conference this morning. I haven't heard this yet, but we have about half a minute of it. So let's listen to the city councilor.
It appears we have defeated the combined efforts of big business, the right wing, the corporate media, the courts, and the political establishment who sought to remove our socialist council office by any means necessary. In other words, the wealthy and their representatives in politics and the media took their best shot at us, and we beat them again.
Jonathan Martin, any reaction from you yet?
Well, do you all see the voting booths or tents that Sawant set up, particularly right around the Seattle Central campus? There was like this, recall Sawant tent with the ballots printing right there. So the Seattle Times editorial board called it out as kind of blurring the lines between campaign and election management. It was an interesting, but I think that really shows, again, Sawant has a machine behind her. I think you can make an argument that she's the most influential Seattle politician and polarizing we've had in about the last decade, because I think she's just really pulled the council left and just certainly injected sort of much more that direct action kind of ethos into city politics. I don't think she's the most effective. She hasn't a really great list of accomplishments to her name, but nonetheless. And now I think she's the senior. Keith, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think she's a senior city council member. Like, are we looking at council president Sawant?
Yeah, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. It looks like it's going to be either Juarez or Herbold And it's worth pointing out that the last time they picked a council president, when they picked Lorena Gonzalez, the word on the street is she got the job because nobody else wanted it. A large part of it is just administrative, right? You have to run the legislative department. You've got to run the city clerk's office and the city auditor's office and the legislative staff, and it's a bunch of work, and that's and little glory for that. But Jonathan, you mentioned an interesting thing about her being polarizing. I think we need to acknowledge that District 3 is a sort of deeply polarized and divided district, right? And the polls for the city show that the politics in the city very much correlate with age, right? The older population tends to be much more moderate. The younger population tends to be much more progressive. And within District 3, I ran the math on this. There are about 32,000 registered voters under the age of 35, which is an enormous, number of them. They vote solidly progressive in their Sawant's base, but they don't reliably vote. And in this time, only 41% of them voted. That was about 13,000. On the other end of it, over 55, there is about 20,000 of those. Very much more moderate politics, but they are super reliable voters. About 68.5% of them voted. So that was just under 14,000 votes, a little bit more than the younger group. And in the middle, we got this swing group of 35 to 54 ages. They're in the middle of in every possible way. They voted including their participation rate. They were about 56%, and that was about 14,500. So, Sawant will always capture the younger group. She will almost never capture the older group. And it's all about sort of what happens in this middle group and how many of them she can convince to follow them, which is really how this ends up.
So I want to preface some of what I have to say here by saying that I don't like recalls in general anywhere for a number of my own sort of democratic principles. I feel like voters should do their homework, study candidates before a first vote in any given election. This ends up just being like a mulligan in golf. The other thing I don't like here is just the way that Sawant responded. I mean, she's going to win by, a couple hundred votes, likely, and she's going to take it as, back to the whole we, they, a polarizing message of how her group prevailed without hearing one thing that the voters said. A lot of them said they don't like the way she governs, but she didn't hear that.
I have a theory, and feel free to debunk this. This is just conjecture and anecdotes. I have a feeling that some Seattle mainstream Democrats, a lot of them, I think, are set off by Sawant, not just because she protested in front of the mayor's house or misused, campaigned improperly, but because if I'm a Democrat and I see myself as the good guy and the Republicans are the villains, I'm good-hearted. Now somebody more progressive than me is calling me a bad guy. I'm a sellout. I'm a hypocrite. That is a cognitive dissonance. And to resolve that dissonance, I either need to agree with her and change my politics, or I need to find a way to think of her as the bad guy to sort of, I just think that's human psychology. The vitriol that I see towards Sawant from some more moderate voters, I just think it can't totally be explained by the charges, letting people into City Hall in a protest.
I think actually the charges themselves wasn't a great set of charges. If you're going to recall somebody, I mean, the letting the folks the protesters into City Hall, I think there was some damage that came with that, and the Durkin, by the way, wasn't the only person that had protesters at her house. I know she has particular sensitivity about her address because her work as a U.S. attorney, but I don't think it was a great set of charges against her compared to some other recall questions we've seen before him. So,
well, I want to flip your question a teeny bit, if possible here. I think one of the mistakes of the progressives in Seattle and elsewhere across the country is this idea of sort of demonizing and making mainstream Democrats your enemy. You agree on so many things, but this idea that, if you don't agree with us, and this really was true in the campaign for all the city races, including the mayor this time. If everybody who isn't, we're calling Bruce Harrell right wing, I mean, really? This is just silly. Some of this just got so silly. And if you don't agree with the progressives 100%, you're the enemy. That makes no sense when you have congressional races coming up next year and people are trying to explain, no, we're all reasonable people here. That just gets away from you. And as to the charges, I guess I think two of them are not that exciting, but the one that I find completely objectionable is going to the home of the mayor. And, you know, she's protected because of her earlier job as a federal prosecutor. We had, you know, the murder of a deputy federal prosecutor in this city. And it to me, I've just been reading a lot about the Ku Klux Klan. I know this is going to sound far-fetched, but there is a relationship between the way the protesters on both sides, left and right, when you go to someone's house and start harassing them, this is, I'm sorry, I do think that's a charge that is very heavy, very serious.
Kevin, anything? One last thing I want to point out. Again, feel free to debunk. I'm not taking a position on recall or don't recall, but the idea that I saw the campaign manager for Sawant said, I'm looking for a brighter Seattle. Here, I have the tape here somewhere. This is Henry Bridger.
I'm looking for a brighter Seattle. I think we've all worked hard for that, and we all deserve that. Go back to being a happy place where we can live and work together.
We deserve to go back to being the happy place. Again, I'm not talking for or against a recall, but are you saying that nothing about capitalism justifies people's unhappiness? Are people unhappy because of homelessness or crime or garbage or racism or police killings or carbon pollution or poverty? Or is it because the city councilor used, you know, city copy machines? It seems to be tone deaf toward that. I think someone is saying capitalism is not making us happy. Again, agree with or disagree. I'm not getting into that. Yes, Kevin.
Yeah. And you know, in some ways, I have many thoughts on this. So, you know, in some ways, just that whole sort of capitalism writ large, you know, is this, you know, is Sawant a referendum on that is, you know, interesting question for us to continue to debate. I think in terms of Bridger's comment there, you know, if it's, we know we have problems, right? The city has always had problems, right? Go back to the 60s and 70s. There have always been problems here and economic issues here. But I think, you know, whether this is a happy place or not is a lot more about whether we're actually, it's more about the direction, you know, what is the vector that we're headed in rather than sort of the moment in time that we're in at this point. And I think when I talk to a lot of folks, I hear a lot of unhappiness because it doesn't feel like things are getting better. They look at what the city government is doing and, you know, is the homelessness problem getting better? No. Is the public safety issues, are the public safety issues getting better? No, right. You know, is the stuff that Sawant is doing right now actually making things better? You could maybe argue in some ways some of the rental protection stuff that she's pushed hard for is making it better for some set of renters, although along with rent control, if she ever gets there, there are larger issues about whether it's going to end up shrinking the rental housing base. It's part of that. But I think, you know, a larger point here around Sawant is that she is absolutely going to keep doing what she's doing because she's 100% focused on her base. She said in a debate leading up to this recall election that she doesn't see herself as representing the voters of District 3, right? She has a base that she's focused on, and that's who she's really trying to address with the work that she's doing. And she's read the demographics of District 3, right? She wouldn't get elected anywhere else in the city, but in District 3, where there's this large number of young progressive voters, if she gets enough of them to turn out, she can continue to elect it. And her bet is that she's going to be able to keep doing that. So she's going to keep, you know, pushing the policy things and saying the things in public that she thinks will get more of those folks out and voting for her.
Okay, we got, thank you. We have to move on. We haven't even started on the week in review. So ballots that were mailed in late, you know, close to the deadline, dropped off on election night, those are being counted. There's some ballots that need a signature confirmation. So they're still counting in this Sawant recall election. Is Seattle getting better? Is on, for example, for homelessness? That's going to come up again on Week in Review because there were some encampment removals that some people were certainly talking about as being a sign of improvement. That and more when we continue on Week in Review. Don't go away.
By the way, Joni, I wasn't trying to minimize the,
Yeah, I
what,
got you.
yeah, there's just been a lot, there's been a lot of it. though,
9
like, you know,
KUOW, Seattle. It's
That's-
12:22. Currently 43 degrees in Seattle. We expect a high today of 46. It's going to get very windy and very rainy later.
Carter Subaru supports KUOW's car donation program.
Hi, I'm Kim Malcolm, local host of KUOW's All Things Considered. If you're thinking about supporting KUOW's news coverage, consider donating a vehicle you no longer use. We'll arrange to have it picked up, sold at auction to someone who needs it, and then invest the money into supporting the news you rely on. Get started today at 1-866-KUOW-CAR.
The KUOW car donation program is powered by Carter Subaru in Ballard, Shoreline, and at cartersubaru.com.
Support for KUOW comes from Flora and Henry, a local independent concept shop in the heart of Pioneer Square, preserving artisanal culture from around the world with curated gifts for men, women, home, and children. Available in-store and online with custom gift wrapping. FloraHenry.com. Live and love.
You are with Week in Review. I'm Bill Radke, your host. I'm here with Joni Balter, Kevin Schofield, and Jonathan Martin. And last week we said we knew that the new Omicron variant was coming to Washington. Of course, it was already here. A King County woman in her 20s tested positive 11 days ago. At last report, she's only experiencing a mild illness, no hospitalization, all of that according to public health. What else should we know about this variant? She hasn't traveled recently. Anything you all want to add to what we know about Omicron in Washington?
Well, I think that what's happening is that our relationship with coronavirus is probably changing as this rolls out. You know, there's so much we still don't know, so you have to preface every answer with that.
Yeah.
But from what we do know, we have to get ready for annual COVID shots of some sort. But I hope they're not every 6 months, but at least annual. We know that sort of the new fully vaccinated has maybe a different definition. It was 2 shots. Now it starts to seem like it's 3 shots, just based on what Pfizer said about its own vaccine, that against Omicron, 2 shots doesn't seem to completely protect you, but 3 might. We don't know that exactly. But so these new normals, change on us just about every time we turn around.
Yeah. 2 other cases here that we know about. One Pierce County man in his 20s, Thurston County man in his 30s, unclear about whether they were vaccinated or how they're doing. So yeah, if the booster is the new expectation, does that just extend our standoff over people? I wonder whether people are, I suppose as time passes and the vaccines, if they're proving safe, maybe some people leave that camp. They're hesitant, but they're not forsworn against vaccines, and maybe we become a vaccinated country.
I saw it. Go ahead, Keith. Sorry.
Flu shots, they've been available for years and they don't have great take up either. I do think, as Joni said, we're going to get to the point where we think of this as a lot like flu shots, right? And what we're seeing now with Omicron maybe being, more contagious but less severe is something that, the public health experts have expected would happen. This is what happens with a lot of contagious viruses like this, that as they evolve to be more, to spread more easily, they do tend to get less severe. So it's not a surprise to the public health community to see this kind of direction. And it does kind of move to something that we handle kind of much more like the flu, which people die of every year. Yeah. It is very serious and it's important. And we've never really built the kind of culture around everybody should get a flu shot every year. That would, save a lot of lives every year. And maybe this will be the thing that finally kicks us into doing that. But again, it's hard to say.
I saw in a Department of Health briefing the other day that after Omicron was sort of the news broke about that the request for vaccinations had ticked up to the highest level since the summer. Right. So I do think that the new variant is putting a little bit of a sense of urgency or a little bit of shock for people that had either, resisted or just kind of put it off or whatever. But, going to Joni's point about sort of our changing relationship, I think that this question of risk keeps coming in. Like, how much are we willing to resume normal activities It was interesting. I had a friend come in from Spokane the other day, and he was just like shocked at how many people were in masks in all settings. Seattle has been extremely cautious in the pandemic. Our friends from outside the area, also, Denver and let alone the Midwest. So I suspect that Seattle is going to continue to be very cautious, but we are reopening. People are resuming normal activities. We're going to sporting events and theater and all of that. So I wonder how much Omicron is actually going to be changing.
Man, you're right. You're right about masks. In the U district, these are young people, not all college students, but a lot of young people. People are masked up outside, all up and down the Ave.
And it served us well, right?
Yeah.
Our the severity of COVID, since really the earliest days of this pandemic, have been pretty low here and consistently low here.
I think we're one of the best cities in the country.
Yeah, I haven't seen that number lately, but we were, maybe a month ago, and I assume we still are, one of the most successful cities and regions for combating it. So we're very lucky here. We probably will take a few more risks than other places because it's not spreading as quickly here. And we don't know what that then produces, maybe an unintended result.
As for Omicron, the King County Public Health Officer, Dr. Jeff Duchin, said there's a lot we don't know yet about the variant. So, Doctor, how would you explain that to Mariners fans?
COVID-19 has thrown another nasty curveball at us.
Mm-hmm.
But this ball has not reached the plate yet, and we don't know if this scary-looking pitch will be a ball or a strike.
You really extended that metaphor.
That's a tortured metaphor. Yeah.
If you get hit by an Omicron curveball, it may hurt less than the Delta fastball and still give you the natural immunity of being on first base.
Once you get on those baseball ones, you can't get off. You just can't stop.
Where does the ball commit?
You don't want to get picked off first base by a quick mutation from the pitcher. And that's all I have to say about that. By the way, Dr. Duchin, how do you pronounce the name of the variant?
It's still very early in the emergence of Omicron.
Omicron. Thank you. I assume you agree, State Health Secretary Umar Shah?
We have been saying it's not a matter of if, but when that we would find Omicron in our state.
Oh, so it's perfect. Omicron. Let's clear this up. Health Secretary, why don't you pronounce it twice?
Omicron is a reason for concern. Omicron is highly mutated.
Oh, okay. Well,
this is the point where we really need to lean on. We need to lean on Seattle's Greek community to really help us out here.
That's good radio, Bill.
Thank you.
That is very good radio.
There's probably different Greek dialects and accents, just like there are here. Maybe they're fighting about it there. The British say, some of them say Omicron, according to the Oxford Dictionary. I'm not kidding about that.
Some people say, "Oh my God."
Yeah. Yes, truly do, including about this program sometimes. So, Kevin, you compared learning about Omicron. I say Omicron, but for no good reason. You compared learning about Omicron to learning about the Sawant recall results that we are microdosing?
Yeah.
On information.
I don't know. What is this obsession that we have with like tiny little bits of information? It's just like, Twitter just like getting into our heads and everything has to be like sort of, we just have to obsess about every little bit. And I mean, you just look at sort of the election results this week, right? It's like everybody was done voting on Tuesday, right? And we could have, King County elections could have just waited until, today to, give us essentially the final total, or, maybe next Monday in this case. But no, we have to
withholding information. That would be your conspiracy theories would bloom.
And the journalists would be sitting there calmly with their hands folded saying, okay, cool. As if not.
But, it's not like any of us can do anything about it, between Tuesday and when the results are counted, other than, a little bit of like, the one exception to that is trying to cure challenged ballots. But beyond that, like, it's a horse race that we're following. I guess, it's sort of like political theater, I guess, right? Or political sports event, right?
Jonathan Martin,
following this horse race.
Yes. Jonathan, will the Seattle Times promise here and now on Week in Review to no longer report the results until all the ballots are counted?
Oh yeah, newsrooms are great for patience.
Yeah,
yes,
that's what they're not.
Bringing us along, Seattle Times.
We do this. We're doing this for Omicron as well, right? It's like we know 2 weeks from now there's going to be really good data about how effective the vaccinations are going to be. And in the meantime, we like every little snippet of information that comes out about, about vaccination. Like, think about the data we got out of South Africa where they said, yeah, the cases were not that severe. And we try to sort of draw large conclusions from that are completely unwarranted in this very anecdotal kind of information. And yet we're still doing that every day while we wait for, actual definitive results.
Well, and like we all want fit this. It's a great. I'm glad you're flagged this. I've thought a lot about this after you did, Kevin. Like we're trying to fit those bits of information into the meta narratives we have about what's going on in society. Like we're if you're a disaster prone, thinking that Omicron is going to be the end of society, or if you're thinking that the Sawant initial recall vote, which had the recall passing, means there's a rightward shift going on in Seattle right now. We're resetting our politics. It's like I just keep waiting as a journalist. I love reading the New Yorker version of a story where you have the whole thing put together in like all of it all at once.
Well, the reason why we do this with ballots, it has to do with the way we set up our mail ballot system, allowing ballots to be postmarked on election day. So we create this week of slow ballot counting. In Oregon, another big mail-in ballot state, you've got to have your ballot received by election day. And so then their ballots come out really quickly. It's sort of in this area of where everybody wants to be an expert because they have a phone and they can sort of breathlessly tap and get more information. But we set the election part of this up. I always wondered what election folks did on Wednesdays during elections. Because it seems like it's showtime. They do a bunch of stuff on Tuesday, but then they kind of go to sleep on Wednesday. And so I called them up and I did ask them, what do you guys do on Wednesdays? And they explained this sort of busy process of getting largely the drop boxes delivered overnight, and then we process those. So they're not sleeping. I was wrong about that. Happy to be wrong about that. Mm-hmm. But it is a function of the way that we set up our vote by mail.
And to be clear, all the drop box, there's two more parts of this which kind of fit together. One is we get a lot of those ballots, but in those drop boxes, it's about 50% now. In the in the November election came in through the drop boxes, and so they're getting picked up at 8 o'clock on Tuesday night, and then Wednesday, what all election staff is doing is they're verifying the signatures. Right? If we were going to polling places, they'd verify who we are when we walk in before we vote, and then they just get to count the tally up all the ballots. Right? But here, we send in our ballots and then they have to verify your signature. So that takes more time on the back end before they can actually count them.
And all the election laws are tilted on making it easier to vote. It's a state that's run by Democrats, and there's the Democrats' strategy in voting is as widespread voting as possible. And so Joni and I were both in the editorial board at one point, and the editorial board of the Seattle Times has argued for this,
about 90 times.
Yeah, about 90 times. And,
lawmakers and Secretary of States have been for it, but it just never gets through the ledge. So.
But you can vote up until the last minute. Now we have same day voter registration. We have motor voter laws. We have this aperture wide open to have as many people vote as possible, which, there's certainly the good for democracy argument to that, but it does.
There's that.
There's that.
and yet they don't. And yet they don't.
I know. Yes, that's what kills me.
Well,
they don't what? Who doesn't?
I have Oregon envy on this. Sorry.
Okay.
We got just over 50% of registered voters.
I see. They don't
in the recall election, and it was a little higher than that in November, but although it was again right around 50%, maybe even a little less for King County as a whole. Right? We're just as a culture not good at voting.
Listen, before we got to move on. But speaking of not having all the information, I assume it's too early to say, heading into the holidays, et cetera, that whether we've got Delta. I mean, Delta is bringing low a lot more people than Omicron. Obviously, we've got a warning heading into the holidays. Does this put even more of a pause on people headed back to work and shopping downtown, all that kind of stuff? Do you have a feeling about that?
Well, yeah, the answer is yes. The answer is now there's another variant. We don't know enough about it, so that builds in time that we need to learn about it. And then when you get to these companies that are trying to figure out what's our start date, because Amazon, they have January 3rd, but now they're blowing through that.
Yeah.
And it's every time they set a date, all the companies, a lot of them, it's like, okay, we didn't mean that date. We have to change it because here's something else we didn't know about. So absolutely. And downtown is suffering a lot from it. You know, lights are on, has that tiny bit of festive feel. There just aren't a ton of people there because the office workers aren't back really in big numbers.
It seems pretty clear that Omicron is going to push the return date, to work out until everybody can get a booster, right? Because it looks pretty clear that people are going to need a booster to be safe from it, or only people with boosters are going to be allowed back. And we may end up ending up with a crunch, a supply issue around booster shots, which is going to harken back to the earlier days of when vaccinations at the beginning of the year were starting to roll out. Many companies may just sort of give up and switch to working from home or hybrid indefinitely if they haven't already said that that's going to be kind of the long-term policy with us.
Do you the pandemic just unionized Starbucks? Can we put that on the pandemic that yeah, I'll let you.
Well, I think that corporate culture can be cautious. Like there's a tendency to read the public health guidance as the most cautious possible. As a journalist, I manage a team of people who all pretty much were hired right when the pandemic started and have barely seen anybody in person over the last 2 years. I see the undeniable value for in-person office work, that spontaneous collaboration. We are missing many opportunities to both have people feel satisfied about their work and also do their best work. So not only Joni's right about the downtown, sort of the economic apocalypse that's looming for the commercial real estate sector and retail downtown, but there is really a cost too of not having people in person.
I bring up Start. We just must move on because we got lots of stuff we can review to touch on. I bring up Starbucks. So this could be brief, but I bring it up because this is a place where you can't phone it in and telework, and these baristas have been dealing with COVID danger and angry customers and all that kind of stuff, and we have a labor shortage going on. And I think conventional wisdom is that all that leads to the first ever unionized Starbucks store. This week they voted yes in Buffalo, although there was also a no vote in a different store and a maybe vote that they're still counting on. Anything interesting to you about the Starbucks vote?
Yeah, well, this is the year of the worker. Every month you read some number about how many Americans quit their job the month before, like 4 million one month, 3 million another month. Workers rule right now. They actually do. They have the upper hand. Not something that we saw coming, but I think it's good. I think it's a better time for unions. I think it's a better time for workers. Workers have some muscle, and companies are going to have to accept some of that. And that unionization is an example, and higher wages while we're at it.
I think it was inevitable, right? And good for the workers, right?
Exactly.
Why do we, it's not like there aren't unions for food service workers. There have been unions for food service workers for decades, right? And why do we think Starbucks is special? Why would they get a special gold star exception from having their workers unionized?
Well, they were famous from years ago for treating their workers relatively well when it comes to benefits, health insurance, wages. Yes.
Yeah, that was one of the bets Starbucks made, is to have a generous benefits package and pretty decent wages and try and stave off unionization. But one of the things I saw in the coverage was one of the arguments for the unionization was not just the core economic issues that come with unionization, but it was this voice at the table. It was an ability to have a more equal footing with managers. And I think that's a real, to me, that I go to sort of the millennial generation intolerance for the status quo. I think that we're going to see more of that. I know that we've seen in my newsroom, I think Crosscut was also recently unionized. And that voice at the table was really a central argument of fairness that went beyond, with the economic issues. But I just find that interesting. I think we're probably with the millennials around here to stay as a big influential generation. We're going to see more of that.
Yeah, I think we're going to see some challenges for the union too, though, right? Because there's a split demographic in among Starbucks workers. They're the people who do this as a full-time job, right? And they have one set of issues, and there's a set of people who work at Starbucks as part-time jobs, and they're going to want more flexibility. They're going to want a whole bunch of issues that are very different from the full-time workers, right? So, in a workforce, a unionized workforce, if this really does spread very broadly to Starbucks stores that tries to represent both of those, they're going to have some challenges. We see this with the efforts to unionize Uber and Lyft drivers as well, right? That they very much have that split, and it's caused a lot of pain and friction inside the efforts, right? And a lot of resistance to unionization because there are these different sets of priorities and issues between different demographics within the workforce.
By the way, I just pulled up Starbucks stock. It's up more than 1% today. It's up for the week. It's up for the month, which I guess I wouldn't have predicted that. Maybe it was, they say investors build that stuff in. Okay.
Pumpkin spice. It's all about the pumpkin spice.
Oh, that's it. I asked for I do occasionally have an eggnog latte, which I'm neither proud nor ashamed of. And my local Starbucks didn't have any eggnog. I also made eggnog myself last night for the first time. So here we see people rebelling, people like me, unwilling to go along with the status quo. I'll just make my own damn eggnog. I'm talking with Joni Balter, a contributing columnist, Joni Balter, Kevin Schofield from Seattle City Council Insight, but not for much longer. He's also a South Seattle Emerald columnist, and from the Seattle Times. What's your title there at the Seattle Times, Jonathan Martin?
I am now the investigations editor.
It's a big deal. That's all I remembered. Investigations editor at Seattle Times. And we're going to come right back. We got lots more to say about the week in review. Big stuff happened this week. Stay tuned.
Support for KUOW comes from Pike Place Market, celebrating the holidays with Santa photos and market-themed wrapping paper on December 4th and December 11th. Market food available while shopping local small businesses. Masks are required. Parking and event details at pikeplacemarket.org.
I'm Julian Marshall, host of BBC News Hour. On today's programme, the High Court in London paves the way for WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange to be extradited to the US to face criminal charges. And a silent strike in Myanmar against continuing military rule.
BBC NewsHour begins this afternoon at 1 o'clock, right after Week in Review. It's 12:44.
Support for KUOW comes from Bartell Drugs. This holiday season, Bartell's has 68 locations throughout the Puget Sound area, as well as online delivery and curbside pickup. More information and Bartell's holiday gift guide is available at bartelldrugs.com.
Four visually charismatic people are on YouTube and Facebook. If you care to watch the show, thank you for listening. It's Week in Review. Bill Radke here, Jonathan Martin, Joni Balter, Kevin Schofield. And some of Seattle, we were talking about, is there progress when it comes to homelessness? Some of Seattle's oldest tent encampments are coming down in Ballard Commons Park, in Bitter Lake, in North Seattle. Of course, we've seen encampments cleared before. It doesn't always mean people go into shelter. Here, though, are two people who say this time is different. City Councilor Dan Strauss from Ballard says this time the city and its partners waited until they had appropriate shelter for the residents.
This encampment removal has been going on for over the last 2.5 months as compared to the old way of doing business, which would take about 2 days. That's why we're seeing a different success.
And near the Bitter Lake camp, the pastor of St. Luke's Episcopal Church, Britt Olson, who offers free meals to camp residents there, told King 5 that she's feeling hopeful about this removal.
Some people I've been knowing for many, many years have shelter for the first time in years. And we just need to continue to increase that. We've been working for a long time to try and ensure that the resources that need to be put into helping people get the help they need actually happen this time.
Okay, some optimism about this time. So who wants to tell us more about what has actually changed in the year or so that these encampments have been in place?
Well, one of the differences this time, one of the reasons why everybody's being sort of bullish about it, people who hadn't been bullish about such steps earlier, is
yeah, like the city councilor, Dan Strauss.
Yeah, we'll talk about him. I have something to say about that.
Okay.
It's interesting because what they did is they really put in the time. They spent a lot of time working with each individual. What do you need? And they benefited from the fact that some new affordable housing was coming on. They were able to expand some of the tiny home villages or expand the locations. And, just the general sort of shuffle through the regular shelters. But they put the time in, they knew the people. That is different. And that sort of makes this one like it's okay. And even a change, as I mentioned here in Dan Strauss, I mean, this is someone who was not for this, but the day of the final day of removal there, stood there like it was, a good idea, something he hadn't earlier expressed such interest in. Anyway, but I think that a bunch of things, a lot of efforts are coming together at the same time. And maybe that will give people hope that we can solve some of our problems.
One of my earlier jobs was managing the homeless team for the Seattle Times, Project Homeless. And, one of the other new things now we have is the hotels. This was a part of the pandemic strategy where King County and Seattle, to buy vacant hotels and open up spots, really give people a more attractive option than the classic mass shelters that were both they were cheaper, but they were unproductive. They were not attractive, and they really didn't end people's cycle in and out of homelessness. But, one of the things that, I think about in the slowness of this is there's a fundamental tension between in the homeless community, the advocacy community, and also the policy community about going with best practices, things that are the most effective. And I think Joni's point about, the slowness of really listening more to what people wanted is important. But there's a tension with the lived experience of the city. That slowness comes with the cost of you not having your park. Ballard Commons has been unusable for people in Ballard for a long time. I live next to Woodland Park, and Woodland Park is, I'm going to guess there's 200 or 300 people living in Woodland Park right now. And it changes the feeling that people have with their parks.
Jonathan, I haven't been there. Literally unusable, or it just changes people's feeling about the parks?
Well, I mean, we had Ballard Commons when it was the peak camp. I mean, it was most of the Commons was a camp. So, I mean, the grass area was pretty much all the tents. It changes the relationship with it, certainly. I mean, Woodland Park is still used. Like I go walk my dog in there every day, but Seattle loves its parks, and we've had a different relationship with our parks when there are homeless camps. Some people are very uncomfortable, feeling unsafe, maybe for good reasons or bad reasons.
Yeah.
So I do think it's interesting that we had a permit. Several years ago we passed a permanent parks district with a permanent levy on property tax, and so parks doesn't have to go out to voters anymore to ask for its operating money. I wonder now if we would pass another parks levy with the frustrations that have really boiled about the interaction of homelessness, the compassionate, slower approach to clearing these camps, and our desire to have open green spaces.
There's certainly a big advantage for the homeless individuals in this sort of, you call it a kind of slow walking approach to encampment removals. It's very much more humane for them, addresses their needs much better, and avoids pushing people around the city. But there's a very high threshold of pain before the city starts one of these. And in these cases, it was very much opportunistic around a point in time. Most of this year, the city has not managed to open up new shelter beds, either in tiny home villages or in non-congregate shelters, or even really in hotels. And just in these last couple of months of 2021, they've opened up a bunch of new ones on the order of like a few hundred new beds. And having that new space has allowed them to do this because all the rest of the shelter space is full. We don't have affordable housing and treatment programs to move people into. So people in shelter are stuck there. And unless new space opens up, they really don't have an opportunity to do these kinds of encampment removals. So they got to do it right now. My worry with this is that there's essentially almost no additional shelter space planned for 2022. So they're going to close Ballard Commons Park, fence it off, clean it all up. They're going to open up again. Are we going to be right back to the same situation that we were in before they did this encampment removal, right? Because we're not going to, the new space that's opening up right now in the shelters, these few hundred beds will be full. They will absolutely be full. And we're going to have the same problem still, because we're not addressing any of this at scale. This is slow moving, small scale, high profile theater that we're doing, and we're not solving the problem.
Well, they do put in new fencing and things like that to prevent these places from repopulating. I just wanted to add one thing here. I know we're running out of time, but I believe that, and echoing something Jonathan said, I believe that conflict between homelessness and public parks that people are paying for and love and have a million feelings toward is the reason you saw the votes that you saw in the November 2nd election. That was sort of the peak of agreement among city voters. Yes, these parks, yes, I feel for homeless people. Yes, I want them to be okay too, but I really think when they take over the parks, you lost me.
But you're saying those are going to clash in 2022 because there's not enough progress being made to change that situation.
Well, there are some affordable housing units coming on. But I don't have the right numbers to say that will absorb this or that.
And the pipeline for affordable housing is years. We're putting, to the city's credit, city council and the mayor, they're putting a ton of money, hundreds of millions of dollars of new money into affordable housing. That's fantastic. It's exactly what we need to be doing. But the problem is it takes years to build it out, right? So it's not going to give us immediate relief to the issues that we're
It will give us some relief, though. I'm a little cheerier about that than you are.
Well, and I think whether the pandemic money that was used, emergency spending that was used to buy the hotels, I don't know what that pipeline is. Keith would know as a city budget perspective, if there's going to be more of that coming in, and the city and the county are going to be able to keep buying more hotels with this new regional homeless authority. That's one possible way of dealing with this.
Finally, on the topic of homelessness, we've still got people living in their vehicles. It's illegal to park too long. And Kevin, you were saying that some businesses respond by illegally blocking those spots with concrete blocks. And you've got, well, yeah, you want to say more about that? There's the tension there, right? Which laws do we want to see enforced? That you're not supposed to do it to block those spots either.
Yeah, there's been some reporting in Publicola and Seattle Times this week. And recently about how some businesses, particularly in places like Ballard and Soto, where there's, a large collection of people living in RVs, have started putting what they call eco blocks, these concrete blocks out in the parking spaces out in front of their buildings to prevent RVs from sort of parking there and then staying there for days or weeks because the city is not enforcing the 72-hour parking rule right now. And those, blocking parking spaces, the concrete blocks, is also illegal, right, under the city traffic code. So, and that also is not being enforced. And it's not just businesses. It turns out there are some city departments like Seattle City Light that are also doing that. They're putting concrete blocks out in front of their facilities to do this. So we have this war between these different groups that are both violating the laws to try to sort of, get along with
and there's
things.
There's two overhangs here. One is that the Stephen Wong opinion came out of the Supreme Court, which declared as a case involving a guy living in his vehicle and having the Homestead Act apply to those. I don't know if we fully know what the policy impact of that is going to be. The other issue is that vehicle homelessness is one of the hardest things to address, particularly RVs. People who have RVs don't want to particularly want to go into like a shelter that are unattractive. So the city has tried to deal with vehicle homelessness in really kind of sporadic ways. When I was running the team, Viana Davila did great reporting on vehicle homelessness. We went around the country looking for models, and the city kind of was going to do some, and then they didn't. And it's been a policy failure to address this population. And the city's really deprioritized it. So the effect is the eco blocks is a way of basically sort of an ad hoc policy being put into place, particularly by businesses.
Team, we are at the end of our, what the heck was that? that's my good news for the week. This is something that made me smile. That's a yodeling pickle, a Christmas ornament. And the point is that, we were saying downtown shopping, not so good, but in Westlake, my colleague, Joshua McNichols, was reporting how Westlake, now that the Climate Pledge Arena is open, the monorail is renovated, light rail is longer, serving more people. Folks are swarming in on the train, shopping around Westlake, and then trooping up Westlake to the stairs and the elevators to the monorail. So in Westlake Center, stores like Fireworks and the Candy Shop are actually selling a lot of Jelly Bellies and a lot of yodeling pickle Christmas ornaments. But I'm not sure. Anything made you smile before we go? Anything happy worthy?
Well, ski season's starting. Getting ready to go. Maybe even next week. Looking for a great year of skiing.
Yeah, good call.
On the Christmas theme, I'm having a lot of fun doing Christmas shopping for family members, and I know a lot of people dread that. I just kind of think it's fun. I try to think about like what can I find for somebody that's going to just sort of like give them a moment when they open it up, and, like I get to go do a thing that I wouldn't otherwise do, right?
Yes, a moment of joy, perhaps, and mirth.
Yeah.
And yodeling. Or whatever.
Yeah, maybe yodeling.
Yeah. Lovely. Joni?
Well, I'll just piggyback on that a little bit and say that, the holidays do cheer people. They are a time, if you can get your booster or whatever, to chill and be with your family, take a break, and just kind of have some fun. And I hope we all do that, because it's been very rainy and exceedingly dark.
Indeed. Well, it's been exceedingly brilliant to have you all here. Jonathan Martin, Seattle Times, Joni Balter, political analyst, contributing columnist. Kevin Schofield doesn't have to publish Seattle City Council Insight forever. He can also be the South Seattle Emerald columnist. Thank you so much. Thanks for being Week in Review this week.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you. Tons of fun.
Great to see you all. You can, because of Juan Pablo Chiquiza and Pio Popescu, you can always watch the show. Search KUOW Public Radio on Facebook or YouTube. Thanks to Kevin Kniestet and Sarah Leibovitz. I'm Bill Radke, and join us for Week in Review, the year version. Year in Review is coming up Thursday the 16th. Go to KUOW.org events/events and tell us what made you smile this year. KUOW.org/events, and then we will year in review on Thursday the 16th. Holiday, day, day, holiday.